Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to lesson number 10b of A Simple Guide to Tajweed series, brought to you by Blossoms of Faith. Today, we will continue to learn about stopping rules. This is the second lesson of 2 lessons explaining stopping rules. In the last lesson, we learned stopping rule number 1, where we replace Tanween Fatha with Alif when stopping. In rule number 2, when we stop on the words that end with Ha at-Ta'neeth, we change Ha at-Ta'neeth, and no matter what Harakat it has, we will stop with Ha Sakina. And in rule number 3, if the word ends with any Harakat other than Tanween Fatha, we stop with Sukoon. In the fourth rule, we check if the last letter is originally sakin or if it is a mad letter which is sakin. In that case, we don't make any change. For example,
تحتها 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 جنتي 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 آمنوا 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 عليهم 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 عليهم.
if the word ends with one of the hams letters, make sure to keep the hams when stopping. For example,
تبت 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 تبت.
don't forget to keep pronouncing the Qalqalah when stopping if the last letter is one of the Qalqalah letters as in the last example.
فانصب 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 فانصب.
But we have 2 exceptions to this rule. The first exception is if the mad letter at the end of the word has a madda sign, which means that we should prolong it 4 beats long if we continue reading. However, when we stop, we skip the extra mad sign and we stop with 2 beats mad only. For example,
ذكراها 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 قالوا 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 الذي 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 الذي.
the second exception is if the word ends with a ha with dhamma followed by a small waw or a ha with kasra followed by a small ya, we skip the small waw or ya and stop with sukoon on ha. For example,
إنه 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 رجعه 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 رجعه.
in the fifth and final rule, if the last letter is mushaddad, which is composed of 2 identical letters, where the first is second and the second is mutaharrik as we learned in lesson 2b, we have to check what letter is the mushaddad letter. If the word ends with noon or mim mushaddada, we will stop with noon sakina or mim sakina with prolonged ghunna to show that this is a mushaddad letter. Otherwise, we will be skipping a letter from the mushaddad letter. For example,
لتسألن لتسألن.
if we stop reading, we will read it
لتسألن لتسألن.
but if we don't pronounce it with prolonged ghunna, it will be read
لتسألن لتسألن.
which is wrong. So, make sure you keep the prolonged ghunna.
لتسألن لتسألن.
Another example,
ثم ثم.
if we stop reading, we will read it
ثم ثم.
but if we don't pronounce it with prolonged ghunna, it will be read
ثم ثم.
which is wrong. So make sure you keep the prolonged ghunna.
ثم ثم.
But if the word ends with one of the Qalqalah letters, we stop with Sukoon and Qalqalah. So, we hold the first letter of the mushaddad letter and pronounce the second letter with Qalqalah. For example,
وتب وتب.
when we stop, we will read it
وتب وتب.
but if we directly pronounce Qalqalah without holding the first letter of the mushaddad, we will be skipping one letter of the mushaddad letter.
وتب وتب.
Which is wrong. So, we should hold the first letter, then pronounce the second with Qalqalah.
وتب وتب.
Another example,
الحق الحق.
when we stop, we will read it
الحق الحق.
but if we directly pronounce Qalqalah without holding the first letter of the mushaddad, we will be skipping one letter of the mushaddad letter.
الحق الحق.
Which is wrong. So, we should hold the first letter, then pronounce the second with Qalqalah.
الحق الحق.
But if the last letter is any other letter other than Noon, Mim or Qalqalah letters, we stop with Sukoon and Nabr, which is raising our voice on that mushaddad letter. For example,
ظل ظل.
if we stop at the end of this word, we read it
ظل ظل.
but if we don't do Nabr, we will be skipping one of the two letters of the mushaddad letter,
ظل ظل.
which is wrong. So, make sure you stop with Nabr.
ظل ظل.
Another last example,
المستقر المستقر.
if we stop at the end of this word, we read it
المستقر المستقر.
but if we don't do Nabr, we will be skipping one of the two letters of the mushaddad letter,
المستقر المستقر.
which is wrong. So make sure you stop with Nabr.
المستقر المستقر.
These are the 5 rules that we need to keep in mind every time we need to stop while reading. Thank you for listening, and see you next lesson where we will revise all the rules that we have learned in this level. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.